Welcome to my channel, where we explore the dark and twisted world of horror stories. Whether you're a fan of classic tales or new and innovative horror, you'll find something to enjoy here. So sit back, relax, and let's get scared together.
I graduated and got a job at a company. So, I left my parents' house and moved to a place near work for easy travel. That evening, while moving my stuff into the new house, I bumped into my old friend Rosie, who happened to be my high school friend and almost my girlfriend. But we drifted apart since Rosie had to move away to another town. As I saw my first love, Rosie, again, I couldn't resist greeting her and asking about her boyfriend in a friendly way. I pretended to inquire if she was currently single. Rosie replied that she had broken up with her boyfriend 2 months ago and was now single. This gave me the idea that maybe I could flirt with her once more and things might work out in my favor. I asked Rosie if she was living with anyone, and she said she was staying with her mother, just the two of them. I saw a chance and invited her to dinner, but she seemed hesitant and worried about her mother's disapproval. So, I quickly changed my invitation and asked her to sit and chat at the nearby park instead. She agreed, and we continued our love story there in the garden. After talking at the park from the afternoon until around 9 p.m., Rosie and I went our separate ways and returned home. I took care of my tasks and had a shower. Later, I heard the doorbell ring, and when I went to check, I found Rosie's mother, Anne, standing there. We exchanged greetings and had a normal conversation. However, before we parted, Anne advised me not to get involved with Rosie again, expressing her concern that someone might hurt Rosie and cause her heartbreak, as any worried mother would do for her child. I denied any romantic involvement and explained that we were just talking as friends like we used to back in school. After the conversation, we all went our separate ways. The next day, before heading to work, I met Rosie and arranged to meet at the garden after I finished my work. She agreed to the plan. When I got off work, I rushed to take care of my responsibilities, took a shower, and dressed nicely to meet her. However, that day, I waited until 9 p.m., and she still didn't show up as we had scheduled. Feeling disappointed, I decided to head back home. After some time, I noticed a figure approaching me, and it turned out to be Rosie's mom. I didn't even get a chance to greet her before she started cursing me, reminding me of her previous warning not to get involved with Rosie in any way. I felt overwhelmed and lost after being scolded by her in the park. Later that night, when I returned home from the park, I could hear Rosie arguing with her mother. The situation seemed tense and troubling, and I didn't know how to handle the complexity of the situation. Understandably, Rosie's mom behaves this way with anyone who gets involved with her daughter. After learning about this, I made the difficult decision to stop talking to Rosie because I didn't want her family to suffer because of me. It was a tough choice, but I believed it was for the best to avoid causing any more trouble or pain. The next day, while heading to work, I saw Rosie standing at the door as usual. However, she seemed sad, so I made the tough decision to approach her and end our relationship. I told her that we should stop talking as I didn't want to be the cause of conflicts between her and her mother. When Rosie heard this, her expression turned even sadder, and she became very angry with me. Seeing her like that, an evil thought crossed my mind, one that I hadn't considered before. Maybe we could pretend to be together for a while and then break things off. I wish I had something with her and dump her off from my life. So I spoke honestly with Rosie, convincing her that it was okay if she doesn't want to stop talking to me. We decided to meet again at the same place that night, but with the condition that she had to agree to it. I went there and waited for her as planned. When Rosie arrived, we sat down and started chatting. After a while, I couldn't contain my curiosity, so I asked her why her mother always disliked me and kept trying to keep us apart. Rosie took a deep breath and began to share the reason. She told me that her mother had gone through some tough experiences in the past, involving someone who had hurt her deeply. Ever since then, she became overprotective of Rosie, fearing that history might repeat itself with someone new in her life. She acknowledged that her mother's behavior might be excessive, but she understood her mother's concern for her well-being, and on top of that, my mom passed away 2 months ago. I was stunned when Rosie replied that her mother had passed away about 2 months ago. I couldn't believe it because Anne had just been there, scolding me. How could she be dead? Rosie insisted on proving it to me and took me to the cemetery. My heart was pounding as I followed her. When we arrived, she pointed to a gravestone, and I looked over. To my horror, I saw Rosie's mother's name on the gravestone. Goosebumps spread across my skin, and I was overcome with a mix of emotions, shock, disbelief, and sorrow for Rosie's loss. It was a chilling realization that Anne had indeed passed away, and I had been talking to her ghost without even knowing it. The entire situation felt surreal, and I didn't know how to process this eerie revelation. Feeling unsure of what to do next, I made the difficult decision to separate myself from Rosie. When I got back home, I tried to concentrate and figure out how to handle the situation with Rosie's mother's ghost. However, I found myself unable to come up with a clear plan, and the weight of it all made me feel overwhelmed. In the end, I chose to let go of the thoughts and stop dwelling on the matter for the night. I decided to go to bed, hoping that a fresh perspective might come to me with some rest. I knew I needed time to process everything and figure out the best course of action, but for now, I needed to find some peace of mind and try to get some sleep. As time passed, I noticed that when I ignored Rosie, nothing unusual happened. However, on the days I decided to say hi or interact with her, I would have unsettling dreams of Rosie's mother, Anne, appearing and warning me not to mess with her daughter, rudely. These dreams startled me awake, and I began to question whether these visions were a product of my own imagination. The recurring dreams left me feeling uneasy and uncertain about the whole situation. I wondered if I was being haunted by my guilt and fear, or if there was something more to these experiences. It became difficult to discern between reality and my own mind playing tricks on me. The fear and confusion only intensified, making it even harder for me to decide on the right course of action. Despite the unsettling dreams, I decided to talk to Rosie once more. However, the same night, I had another dream of Anne, cursing and warning me again to stop interfering with her daughter's life. This repeated experience made me certain that the visions were not just my own imagination. Determined to make things right and seek closure, I made the choice to stop getting involved with Rosie and her life. I realized that my actions might be causing harm, and I wanted to respect both Rosie's and Anne's feelings. To find some form of resolution, I decided to visit Anne's grave and apologize for any unintentional pain I might have caused. The idea of seeking forgiveness at the cemetery was both daunting and necessary. I hoped that by expressing my regrets and respecting the memory of Rosie's mother, I might find some peace and understanding in the situation. It was time to confront the consequences of my actions and seek to mend the delicate relationships involved. The next day, I gathered flowers to pay my respects at Anne's grave, and I sincerely apologized for my actions. On my way back home, I unexpectedly met Tom, the village pastor. He inquired about my visit, and I explained that I had come to say hello to Anne, Rosie's mother. To my horror, Tom revealed a shocking and chilling story. He told me that Anne had passed away 2 months ago, and the cause of her death was suicide by hanging. My heart sank as he mentioned that she died under the very pine tree where I had arranged to meet Rosie for our conversation. I was utterly shocked to hear Tom's words about Anne's tragic end. I couldn't comprehend how such a devastating chain of events had unfolded. I asked Tom if Anne had been concerned about her daughter Rosie. Tom revealed that the place where Anne hanged herself was the same spot where Rosie had taken her own life before. The heart-wrenching truth was that Rosie had disappointed her mother by committing suicide, and this unbearable loss had led Anne to take her life as well, just to be with her daughter. Visiting Rosie's grave next to her mother Anne's grave was a somber and haunting experience. The weight of their tragic story and the realization of the pain they endured became even more real to me. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sorrow and regret for the role I might have unknowingly played in their suffering. The following day, I made a firm decision to quit my job and return to live with my parents. The haunting events and the deep impact of this experience made me realize the importance of distancing myself from anything that could potentially cause harm to others. I wanted to protect myself and others from any more unintended consequences and to find solace and support for my family during this difficult time. The memories of Rosie, Anne, and their heartbreaking fate would forever be etched in my mind. I knew that I needed to take this painful lesson to heart and be more mindful of my actions and their potential consequences in the future. My focus now was on healing, learning from this dark chapter, and ensuring that I could move forward with a greater sense of compassion, empathy, and responsibility toward others. I work at a pub as the manager, handling everything on my own. The store was getting ready for a big concert, making it an extremely busy time. Little did I know, that night would lead me to an unexpected and chilling encounter. After closing up for the night, it was already past 2 o'clock. As I was heading out, I heard strange dragging footsteps near the tunnel in front of the store. It startled everyone, but I tried to dismiss it. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang, and everyone around me seemed shocked. I picked up the call, and a woman's voice echoed through the line. She said she needed to discuss something urgent with me. I explained it was too late and asked if we could talk tomorrow. Surprisingly, she agreed but insisted I must answer her call the next day. Curiosity got the better of me, and I accepted her unusual request. The following night, the phone rang louder than before. It was her again, stating she couldn't enter her own house and needed my help. I was taken aback by the strange request from someone I'd never met. She pleaded for my assistance, making it a matter I shouldn't be involved in. Still, she kept pushing me to talk to her father. I pondered why she couldn't talk to him herself directly. Despite my confusion, I was intrigued by her persistence. She shared her personal details, including her name and address, and begged me to talk to her father, as her parents wouldn't let her inside their house. In my heart, I found it odd that she couldn't communicate with her father herself. But I shrugged it off, thinking, maybe there's a good reason for this phone-only conversation. I told her I was too busy to handle this situation, hoping she'd understand and give up. To my surprise, she did agree, but only after negotiating for a week instead of 10 days. Feeling somewhat uneasy, I reluctantly promised to help her after a week. And that's when things began to take a dark and unexpected turn. The next day, I noticed people looking at me strangely, as if they had seen someone with me. Even the employees at the store assumed I had brought my girlfriend to work. I found it odd, but I tried not to dwell on it. That night, while I was dining at my usual spot, the owner asked why my friend wasn't eating with me. Confused, I responded that I had no friend with me, but he insisted he saw someone. Brushing it off as a misunderstanding, I continued with my meal. The next evening, on the second day, since I promised to help the mysterious woman, I was back at work, trying to focus on my responsibilities. I noticed Danny's friends giving me strange looks, but I tried to ignore it, believing they were merely curious. After we closed up, Danny and I went to our regular spot to eat and chat. We talked about the woman who had been calling me for the past few days, and Danny asked if I had met her. I told him I hadn't seen her, only talked to her on the phone. Later that night, while I was in the restroom, my phone rang again. This time, the woman sounded anxious and worried. We spoke for a while, and then she asked me if I was telling her the truth. Before I could respond, she let out a piercing scream that sent shivers down my spine. I was bewildered, wondering how such a loud scream could come from a phone call. It was as if she was screaming right next to me. Danny rushed in, alarmed by the loud noise he heard through the phone. We tried calling back, but the call didn't connect. On my way home, my mind was filled with thoughts of the woman, her strange requests, and her haunting scream. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to visit her the next day, wanting to get to the bottom of this bizarre situation. I asked Danny to accompany me, thinking it would be better to have someone else there. The following day, I dialed her number again, but this time a man answered the call. I told him about the woman's calls and shared the details she had given me. To my surprise, he revealed himself as her father. He confirmed that he was indeed her father, but what he said next shook me to the core. He told me that she had been dead for 5 days. My heart sank, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could that be possible when we had been talking every day? I expressed my disbelief, telling him that we had spoken numerous times over the past 5 days. However, her father said that he received the phone because it was ringing from her funeral. He explained that the phone's battery had been dead all along, raising even more questions about the eerie situation. I asked for directions to her funeral, wanting to pay my respects and find some closure. On the way, an employee who came with me noticed her when she's sitting next to me at the pub. Even Danny remembered seeing her with me, but it couldn't be possible since she was dead. It was a chilling experience, and I couldn't comprehend how her spirit had been contacting me for all those days. I was haunted by her story and the strange events that followed her death. When I finally met her father, he shared the details of what happened that fateful night. On the day of the concert, she had asked her friend to go with her, and she stopped by the pub to get the concert pass. I vaguely remembered that moment, but I couldn't have imagined what would happen next. Tragically, she had an accident while driving to pick up her friend. Her car crashed into a lamppost just 300 meters away from the shop, and she died on the spot. Since that day, her spirit had been following me, trying to reach out for help. It explained the strange occurrences and the unsettling feeling I had been experiencing. It was as if she wanted something from me, and now I understood why. I wondered why her spirit had latched onto me. I attended her funeral, fulfilling the promise I had made to her, hoping it would bring her the peace she desperately sought. This haunting experience left a deep mark on my soul, forever changing the way I viewed the world. I'll never forget her, and I hope she finally found the happiness and rest she deserved in the afterlife. I've been working as an ambulance driver at the hospital for quite some time now, and I'm quite good at what I do. One night, at 3 a.m., the rescue center radioed me about a patient with chest tightness at the cemetery. Now, this cemetery is infamous for its ghostly tales, but duty called, so I rushed to the scene. When I got there, the cemetery was shrouded in darkness with no lights around. No one was there, and no sign of any patient either. I waited for a while and then radioed the center to check if there was any update on the patient. They told me to go deeper into the cemetery through the back. I followed their instructions, but to my surprise, I still couldn't find anyone in that area. It was getting eerie, and I radioed back to the center to inquire if the patient had arrived. They responded, saying that the patient's relatives see you drove right past them, sounding angry that I didn't stop. But there was nobody, and I told them that. They asked me to wait a little longer while they tried contacting the patient's relatives again. Feeling worried, I decided to look around for the patient myself. I stepped out of the ambulance and searched the area. After some time, the center informed me to cancel the mission and head back to the emergency medical service. As I was about to leave, I noticed a shadowy figure resembling a person walking towards my car. A man came up to the car, clutching his chest and looking like he was in extreme pain. Without a second thought, I rushed to help him. I figured the symptoms were severe, so I helped him into the back of the ambulance without bothering to search for any relatives. I opened the ambulance door, expecting my colleague to assist, but when I turned around, my colleague was sitting there motionless, looking terrified. Confused, I urged my colleague to help, but they stammered and said that I had gone outside the car and done back and forth there and there was no one with me. I was chilled to the bone, realizing that something strange was happening. I quickly closed the ambulance door and drove away from the cemetery. Back at the EMS center, I shared my unnerving experience with a coworker named Jack. Jack told me something even more bizarre. He said he had received the call from the patient earlier, and the voice instructed him to pick them up at the cemetery I radioed you. He called the patient's relatives for the second time, and he told me to drive into the cemetery in case it went through the back. Third time Jack calls again, but it says this number is not activated or registered, then I radioed you to come back. Jack showed me the call logs to prove it, and I knew he wasn't joking. This mysterious person seemed to be playing tricks on us, trying to convey some cryptic message. The entire situation was surreal, and we couldn't make sense of it. As the night progressed, we couldn't shake off the feeling that something paranormal was at play. But we had to finish our duties and respond to other calls. However, every time we drove past that cemetery, an eerie chill would run down our spines. I went on a vacation to the countryside with my younger brother, Max. We headed to his old house from when he was a child. The journey was eerie, with strange illusions lining the road, surrounded by tall grass forests. The road was rough and bumpy, barely recognizable. After driving about 10 kilometers, we reached Max's aunt's house. When we arrived home, we met Aunt Susan. She led us inside, and we chatted about different things. Max, after a moment of thinking, questioned Aunt Susan about the village appearing abandoned. Susan explained that people had moved away, but Max and I didn't find it intriguing enough to dig deeper. When our talk concluded, Susan revealed she wouldn't be sleeping at home that night. Instead, she planned to join her neighbors at the church, preparing for an upcoming ceremony in a few days. Little did we know that this seemingly ordinary conversation would unravel dark secrets and unexpected twists. Afterward, Susan asked if we had anything to eat. If not, she suggested going to an event in the city to find some food. Before leaving, Susan emphasized that if we returned after 9 p.m., it'd be safer to stay at a nearby hotel instead of going home. She expressed concerns about the lonely road and the potential for accidents. However, if we returned before 9 p.m., she advised us to lock the house, sleep before 11 p.m., and not venture anywhere during the night. I asked why she was so cautious, and Susan replied that peculiar dangers were lurking in the darkness. But if we planned to visit our aunt the next day, she instructed us to drive about 500 meters further to her house, where we'd find a church where Aunt would be sleeping. After our meal together, we wandered around the area, and by the time we checked the time, it was around 8 p.m. Seeing that it wasn't past the time Aunt Susan had mentioned, we decided to head back home. As we arrived at the house, an eerie silence greeted us, as if nobody was around. We sat together for a while, chatting and enjoying each other's company. As the clock struck 10 p.m., we decided it was time to prepare for bed. But just as we were about to settle in, the sound of people arguing erupted from the neighboring house. The voices were filled with tension and fear, and they sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged anxious glances, wondering what could be causing such a disturbance at this late hour. As the woman and the man quarreled, the argument became more intense. They threw things, and the room fell silent, making every sound audible. Max just said, "Please, let's not shoot each other." After he finished speaking, a gunshot echoed, bang. Not more than 5 minutes later, 2 more shots were fired, bang, bang. After that, we decided to investigate what happened. The phone had no signal, so we couldn't call the police or Aunt Susan. When we reached the house where the gunshots came from, I had Max run to find someone for help, and David climbed into the back in case of an emergency, so I could assist them when needed. The rest of us searched for an entrance to the house because the door was locked. Together, we knocked on the door and called for the owner to open it. After a while, we heard footsteps from another part of the house. I asked my brother Daniel to follow up and seek help or call the police if he had a phone. Daniel quickly ran after the sound. After some time, he returned, urging us to run away. Confused and frightened, I didn't understand what we were running from, but Daniel dashed past me in the opposite direction. Later, I noticed a shadow emerging from the alley across the street where Daniel had gone to seek help. It was still very dark, but I could make out the figure. As the shadow moved closer to a well-lit spot, I saw something horrifying. The person had no head. The sight paralyzed me, and I lost consciousness, unable to comprehend the terrifying reality before my eyes. After a while, I heard David's voice calling out to me, snapping me back to my senses. He shouted, "Hey, this place is so abandoned. We need to leave now." Slowly, my consciousness returned, and though the situation was far from good, at least I could move again. I sprinted to our car, forgetting about the headless man we had seen earlier, who was still walking nearby. Getting into the car, I wasted no time and drove away from that haunting place. After driving for a while, we came across Daniel lying injured on the side of the road. I couldn't tell what had happened to him. A bit later, we found Max unconscious at the grocery store. I quickly helped Max into the car, and we decided to head to the church to find Aunt Susan. Driving in the darkness made it challenging to see anything clearly, but I kept going, desperate to reach the church and find Aunt Susan. After some time, we approached a hill with a church perched on top. I accelerated towards it, hoping that Aunt Susan would be there and that we could finally find safety and answers to the horrors we had experienced. When we arrived at the church, we found a pastor standing outside. Daniel rushed to him, seeking help. He exclaimed, "Please, help us. We've been deceived by ghosts. Help us." The pastor invited us into the church for safety. We carried our injured bodies inside, and he asked us to stay there while he went out to check the surroundings. Trembling with fear, we agreed and sat in the church, feeling exhausted and terrified. Eventually, exhaustion overcame us, and we fell asleep. The next morning, we woke up to Aunt Susan and villagers from the neighborhood standing before us. Confused, Aunt Susan asked Max why we had come here and what we were doing. Max explained that we were looking for her at the church. However, Aunt Susan's reply shocked us all. She said that while she was indeed at the church, but not here, this place was abandoned and hadn't been used for almost 10 years. There were no pastors or people in the church, leaving us bewildered and questioning our own experiences from the night before. The chilling realization struck that the events of the previous night might not have been as they seemed, and the mysteries surrounding Aunt Susan's village were far from being solved. I glanced around and noticed that the church was covered in dust and spider webs. The condition of the place was old and worn, and the roof appeared to be in ruins. However, I couldn't recall it being this way last night. Perhaps fear had clouded my perception, and I had failed to notice the true state of the church during the terrifying events. Aunt Susan then led me to the present church that the village was currently using and began to share the whole story. 4 months ago, the headless man we encountered in front of that abandoned house had actually been a resident of this very village. He had a bitter fight with his girlfriend, and the pain and resentment in their relationship led him to a tragic decision. He chose to end his life by hanging himself in the forest near the village, where his body went unnoticed for quite some time. Eventually, the decay caused his head to detach from his body. Now, on certain days, the villagers claim to catch glimpses of him roaming the village, searching for his lost head. His spirit seems trapped between realms, unable to find peace. The haunting sight of the headless figure searching for its own severed head sends shivers down the spines of those who dare to witness it. The tragic tale of his lost love and gruesome fate has become a chilling legend that echoes through the village, reminding everyone of the darkness that lurks in its shadows. The abandoned house where the quarrel occurred was once home to a troubled couple. Their arguments revolved around suspicions of infidelity, with the man suspecting that his wife was having a secret affair with someone else. The tensions escalated until the man confronted his wife about the affair, leading to a heated and fatal altercation. In a fit of rage, he resorted to using a firearm, tragically ending his wife's life with a gunshot. As for Max, he ran after someone to seek help and ended up passing out in front of the grocery store. When he regained consciousness, he told me that he had seen Aunt Susan sitting in front of the shop and had rushed to ask for assistance. However, to his horror, he noticed that Aunt Susan's eyes were missing. The shock was too much for Max, and he fainted until I arrived to find him there. Daniel, who ran past me, had also suffered an injury, fracturing his arm for no apparent reason. As foreigners in the village, we were unaware of the unusual occurrences that took place here. The villagers had a unique tradition of staying inside their houses until morning, which explained why the village often appeared abandoned. It wasn't surprising to learn that such mysterious events happened, and Aunt Susan explained that every month, the village experienced a few days with these enigmatic incidents. Unfortunately, it was our misfortune to encounter one of these serious mysteries the previous night. The chilling revelations and unexplained phenomena had left us bewildered and deeply unsettled. The secrets of the village seemed to be woven into a tapestry of darkness and uncertainty, and we couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries lay hidden beneath the surface. The haunting events of that night would forever stay with us, an unforgettable encounter with the inexplicable and the terrifying. I never believed in ghosts or spirits until one eerie encounter changed my perspective entirely. It all began when my seldom seen friend, Josh, shared a spine-chilling tale with me. He revealed that he and his friends had a wild drinking session at his friend's house one night. In their drunken stupor, they began challenging the mysteries of the house. However, the owner, wary of the consequences, tried to dissuade them, as it was his own home they were tampering with. But Josh, seemingly undeterred, took a moment of silence before making a daring move. He entered his friend's house and shocked everyone by picking up an urn containing his friend's grandmother's ashes. In a macabre act, he poured the ashes over his eyes, declaring that he wanted to continue the challenge. He warned his friends not to seek his help if anything went wrong during their escapades. Nothing supernatural happened during the night, and Josh was about to leave, triumphant. However, the house owner stopped him and showed him a picture that shattered his bravery. The photo depicted Josh and his friends sitting together, but upon closer inspection, he realized that they were all deceased. The very friends he had just spent the night with were now hauntingly captured in an image of death. Fearing for his life, Josh ran away in terror. As Josh recounted this horrifying story, I struggled to believe the inexplicable events he described. Nevertheless, I dismissed it as a mere concoction of his imagination. After all, I was indifferent to such mysteries and didn't believe they could happen in reality. As I shrugged off his story, Josh touched me and abruptly left my house. Days passed, and I heard nothing from Josh. My attempts to contact him were futile, so I decided to visit him personally, fearing that I might have offended him with my skepticism. Upon reaching his house, I found it eerily deserted, as if no one had lived there for quite some time. Seeking information, I went to a nearby cafe and called our mutual friends to inquire about Josh's whereabouts. To my surprise, no one had heard from him either. As news of my search for Josh spread, a stranger approached me, claiming to be a distant relative of his residing in the area. He revealed a startling truth: Josh had died in an accident at his friend's house just a month ago. This revelation left me stunned and shaken. I had never expected to find myself entangled in such a tragic turn of events. To validate the stranger's words, I went to the cemetery, where I found Josh's grave bearing his name and the date of his passing, a month ago, just as the man had said. My skepticism shattered. I couldn't escape the chilling realization that Josh's ghostly tale had come to a hauntingly realistic conclusion. His visit to his friend's house that night had led to a series of inexplicable events, culminating in his untimely demise. From doubting the supernatural to experiencing a ghastly twist of fate, I now carry the weight of this unnerving encounter, forever changing my beliefs and perception of the unseen world. I was really sick, so I had to go to the hospital and stay there because of dengue fever. I felt terrible and wasn't fully conscious for the first 2 days. On the third day, I started to feel a bit better and got bored lying around all the time. I was in a room with 10 beds, and I stayed in the second one. 4 other patients were also in the room. One on my left in the first bed, another on my right in the third bed, and the last one across from me in the fourth bed. The person in the fourth bed seemed very ill and unconscious. Feeling lonely, I struck up a friendship with the patient in the first bed since their symptoms weren't too severe. We talked and got to know each other, and I felt a little better having someone to chat with. However, things started to get weird one afternoon when I noticed the patient in the third bed staring at me constantly. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just a sick person's behavior, but it continued for a while and made me uncomfortable. I asked the patient in the first bed why the third bed patient kept staring, and we tried to change the topic to avoid feeling bad. During one night, around 12:20 a.m., I heard the patient in the fourth bed calling out Bob 3 times. It seemed like he was delirious due to the injury. Even the patient in the first bed was also looking towards the fourth bed, but we didn't think much of it and eventually fell asleep due to the effects of medication. The next night, the same thing happened again. The fourth bed patient called out Bob 3 times before going quiet. I talked to the first bed patient, and they shared some life advice, which was comforting. My brother, who worked as a male nurse in the hospital, came to visit me. He asked about my symptoms and whether I felt lonely. I mentioned that talking to the first bed patient helped ease the loneliness. I had to endure a couple more nights in the hospital before finally being able to leave. The last night was the most disturbing. The fourth bed patient was delirious and kept calling out for Bob. When I looked to my right, the third bed patient was staring at me with intense eyes, making me uneasy. Later, I overheard the relatives of the fourth bed patient talking to the doctor. It turned out that the fourth bed patient and his friend Bob had an accident during their journey. The patient in the fourth bed, named Tim, was in a coma, and his friend Bob had died. I understood the cause of the strange occurrences in the hospital. The next day, when I left the hospital, I asked my brother to take me home. While I was getting medicine, I heard Tim's relatives crying for a doctor. I realized I forgot something in the patient's room and asked my brother to retrieve it. When he returned, he said that Tim had passed away, but I was relieved to know that he hadn't died while I was there. On our way home, my brother asked if I felt lonely in the hospital. I said it wasn't too bad because I had the first bed patient to talk to. My brother then told me that the first bed patient's name was Bob. I was surprised to learn that Bob had died in his bed on the same day they were both brought to the hospital. My brother had actually removed Bob's body from the room but didn't tell me to spare my feelings. This revelation sent chills down my spine, making me rethink the strange occurrences during my stay in the hospital. It was an unsettling and eerie twist to the story, leaving me with many unanswered questions.
Thank you, awesome audience, for tuning in. Your support and enthusiasm mean the world to us. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Until next time, keep spreading positivity and embracing creativity. Stay amazing, and we'll see you soon.
Murderous memories. When I was a teenager, I had a close relationship with my best friend, Emma. She was a tomboy with a generous personality, and we loved spending time together. One day, while sitting and chatting, Emma asked me if I loved her. I responded affirmatively, knowing that my feelings for her were strong. Emma teasingly said, "Even if I were dead, you'd still love me." Without hesitation, I assured her, "Of course, my love for you would never fade, even in death." As time passed, we couldn't hang out as frequently due to our busy schedules. One night, as I was heading home, I noticed someone who looked like Emma standing by her house. I tried to call out to her, but uncertainty made me hesitate. Later, I discovered that she had been at the same place as the previous night, asking for a ride to the hospital to find her mother. I gladly agreed and drove her there. Upon arriving at the hospital, I greeted Emma's mother, whom I had never met before. Everything seemed normal, and I went home after dropping them off. Strangely, the next night, the same scenario repeated. I encountered Emma on the road again, and she asked for a ride to the hospital. This time, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling of déjà vu. Emma's mother appeared to collect her, just like before. The following morning, I learned that my neighbor, Uncle Matt, had an accident in front of Emma's house and was taken to the hospital. When I visited him, he mentioned that Emma was involved in the accident. Surprisingly, when the police investigated Emma's house, they found no one there. Acting on a hunch, they decided to check the nearby garbage dump, and there they discovered Emma's lifeless body. Devastated by the news of her murder, I rushed to the scene of the accident to confirm if it was truly Emma. The sight of the key tattoo on her body confirmed my worst fears. Emma had been shot point blank from behind, her body discarded like trash. The police estimated she had been dead for several days. Confused and grief-stricken, I shared my experiences with my friends, who suggested that I might have a sixth sense that allowed me to communicate with spirits. Determined to find answers, I revisited the places where I had encountered Emma before her death. At one of those locations, I stumbled upon her bracelet and a notebook that seemed to belong to her. As I read the chilling contents of the notebook, I discovered that Emma had been involved in a dark world of drugs, and it detailed the events leading up to her murder. Overwhelmed and terrified, I decided to report everything to the police. Together, we found the notebook and, to my shock, discovered an old disused cemetery nearby. Among the few graves, one bore Emma's mother's name, who had passed away over a decade ago. I couldn't comprehend how I had spoken to her just 2 days before. It felt like a surreal nightmare, and my mind raced with questions. The police eventually caught the person responsible for Emma's death, who confessed that he had killed her to silence her involvement with drugs. He revealed that he had arranged to meet Emma at the dump site that night, where he shot her and buried her body. Shortly after the killer's imprisonment, news spread that he had died, and he claimed that Emma had haunted him every day in prison until his last breath. Even though justice was served, the whole ordeal left me with lingering unease. The inexplicable connection I felt with Emma and her deceased mother haunted my thoughts. I wondered if it was merely coincidence or something far more mysterious. Emma's tragic story would forever be etched in my memory, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. One gloomy evening, my phone rang with a mysterious call. A chilling gust of wind whispered through the receiver, sending shivers down my spine. Unsure of who or what was on the line, I quickly hung up, trying to dismiss the eerie feeling that lingered. Moments later, the phone rang again, and this time, an old man's voice greeted me. He asked if I had experience dealing with termites. Surprised by his question, I cautiously replied that I could help. The old man then requested to meet at a house plagued by termites, so we could discuss the details. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to explore the place with my friend. However, locating the house proved to be a challenge. Seeking help, we stumbled upon a grocery shop where we met a grandma. She pointed us towards a steep forest but warned us against going there in the dark. Determined to check the location before the next day's work, I assured her it was just a quick visit. After an arduous journey through tall grass and dense trees, we finally reached the house. Its desolate appearance suggested it had been abandoned for years. Inside, ancient furniture and cobwebs filled the rooms, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. As we searched, we stumbled upon a picture of the old man hanging on a wall, and beneath it lay a pile of rotten fruit. My friend froze, unsettled by the discovery. I couldn't blame him. It felt like something wasn't right. We decided to leave the house, but as we turned to go, a bone-chilling figure appeared before us, the haunting presence of the old man. Fear gripped us, and we ran towards our car, desperate to escape. To our horror, the car keys were nowhere to be found. Panic surged through us, and we fled to seek help at the grandma's shop. However, upon arrival, the shop vanished without a trace, leaving us bewildered and terrified. Exhausted and overwhelmed, we were unable to run any further. Just then, a familiar face appeared, the native, Alex. Without saying a word, he took us away from that nightmarish place. We found refuge in a hotel, but sleep eluded us, haunted by the events of the day. The next morning, we called Alex again, asking him to drop us off at the grandma's shop to thank her and search for the missing car key. Oddly, Alex hesitated, choosing to park nearby instead, promising to explain later. Back at the house, we searched desperately and finally found the key hidden under the old man's picture. Alex seemed disturbed, muttering something about not wanting to disrespect the old man and mentioning bringing him to look for things. Intrigued, we decided to explore the house further. There, we stumbled upon evidence of termites, just as the old man had warned. A peculiar connection seemed to form, compelling us to fulfill the old man's wish and exterminate the termites. During the task, my friend made a surprising discovery, a dusty old phone, seemingly belonging to the old man, the same phone that called us earlier. We completed the termite extermination and left the house in the company of Alex. He then shared unsettling details about the tall grass surrounding the house and the grim fate of the old man decade ago. He had drowned in the nearby swamp. In a twist of fate, we stumbled upon the lifeless body of the old man floating in the swamp, revealing the tragic truth behind his appearance. To our astonishment, we learned that the old man was Grandma's husband, and her grief had led to her death. Before departing, I playfully wished the old man good health and wealth, never suspecting it would come true. Later, I won the lotto, leaving me both grateful and unsettled about the inexplicable events we had encountered. The story concludes with a haunting realization that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and the veil between the living and the dead may be thinner than we think. The chilling experience will forever be etched in our minds, a tale of curiosity and consequences that would stay with us for the rest of our lives. The ghostly canal. I had just moved into a quaint house nestled by the peaceful canal. Little did I know that this seemingly serene place would soon turn into a chilling nightmare. The very first day at our new home, something dreadful happened to my brother, Tom. While we were unloading our belongings, Tom inexplicably jumped into the water. Frantic, I rushed to the canal to find out what had triggered such a strange action. Tom claimed he saw my son drowning, sending shivers down my spine. But when I checked, my child was safe and sound, sleeping in his room. Bewildered and relieved, I told Tom to swim back to shore, but as he struggled, he felt something gripping his leg underwater. With the strength of panic, he shouted for help, and I reached out to pull him up, only to be startled by the eerie sensation of a cold, human-like hand. Eventually, we managed to get him out of the water, but the bizarre incident left us all with lingering questions. 2 weeks later, my friend Moore came to visit, and we decided to take a late-night boat ride along the canal. At 11 p.m., we set sail, enjoying the calm waters and cool breeze. However, our tranquility was interrupted when a window creaked open from a nearby house. An old woman's voice, which we assumed belonged to a grandmother, scolded us for disturbing the villagers with our loud boat. Puzzled, we agreed to turn the boat back, but as we sailed, an unexplainable force seemed to lift the front of the ship, almost as if something wanted to guide us back towards the grandmother's house. Moore, becoming increasingly curious, shone his flashlight toward the canal. To our horror, we saw a dim figure on the water's surface, gradually becoming clearer. It was a human head, slowly ascending to reveal a towering shadow standing in the middle of the canal. Panic engulfed us as we shouted, unsure of what to do. Then, the grandmother's voice spoke again, ordering us to leave. The voice echoed through the air, and the large figure vanished in an instant. Back at home, we tried to make sense of what had happened. Moore asked if we heard the voice, and I confirmed that it was indeed the grandmother's voice we heard earlier. But Moore insisted that the shadow we saw was different. It was the grandmother's shadow on the water. Confused, we pondered over the strange occurrences, unable to find any logical explanation. The following morning, curiosity got the best of me, and I ventured to the spot where we had taken the boat ride. There, I discovered an abandoned house by the canal, surrounded by dense forests. Amongst the overgrown bushes, I noticed old women's clothes and spirit shrines, which sent shivers down my spine. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The ghostly shadow we encountered must have emerged from the disturbed spirit shrine, angered by our intrusion into its realm. It seemed the spirit had played a dangerous game with us, trying to capsize our boat, yet Grandma's voice, which we believed to be a protective force, had kept us safe. Whispers in the dark. I and Bob arrived in a far-off province for work. We settled into a small hotel, room number 103, at the far end of the left corridor. As we entered, we double-checked the room's condition and noticed a shrine tucked away in the corner. Bob, feeling tired, dozed off at 8 p.m. But after a while, he jolted awake, frantically searching for something. Before dozing off, Bob asked about our work progress. If it was nearly done, he wanted to hurry, shower, and sleep. Once the work was complete, I headed for a shower, preparing for bed. It was already 12:30 a.m. My dreams took me on a winding road, but I sensed that the car was tilting as if being crushed and tumbling off a cliff. Aware that it was a dream, I struggled to wake up but couldn't. Panicking, I attempted everything to rouse myself until I finally succeeded. I woke up lying on my side, facing the bathroom, but my right arm and waist were numb. When I turned around, I glimpsed a black leg resting on my waist. I wondered if it belonged to Bob, but as I looked, I saw a large, black man sitting on Bob's bed, with one leg crossed over me, leaning down to embrace Bob. Reacting quickly, Bob kicked the dark figure and shouted. I grabbed a bolster and threw it, and just like that, the black figure vanished. With the room lit up, I turned to Bob to check on him, but he seemed to be wrestling with something. I scolded him, and he calmed down upon hearing my voice, sitting back on the bed. I asked Bob what happened, but he remained silent, head down, refusing to answer. Persistently, I inquired if he had seen anything strange. Bob looked at me, repeating, nothing. I didn't believe him, so I shared what I had seen, the black figure trying to embrace him. I claimed not to be scared, but deep down, fear gripped my heart. Bob finally opened up and recounted his experience. When he first woke up, he saw the black figure muttering, I want fried pork, and then reaching for some from under the bed. Initially, Bob thought the figure was me, a friend. But then he saw the dark figure sit down beside me and extend his leg over my waist. As the figure bent to hug Bob, he kicked with all his strength, just as I had witnessed. Fear consumed us, so we rushed to the reception to request another room. Regrettably, there were no vacancies. As it was late, we decided to leave the hotel immediately. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock, dreading the long day ahead. I had just started working as a security guard at a company close to a community landfill. It was a new job, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. As I reached the company, I saw the enormous landfill nearby, its pungent odor filling the air. The thought of spending my day so close to that stench didn't thrill me, but it was my duty. The day went on, and my shift was extended due to staff shortages. I found myself working for a grueling 36 hours. The fatigue was overwhelming, and I longed for some rest. My boss, noticing my tired state, advised me to find a quiet place to sleep during the break. He warned me not to let anyone see or know about my secret sleeping spot. The idea seemed odd, but I didn't want to question it. I was desperate for some rest. Just then, Tim, my colleague, came up to me with a sly grin. "Hey, I know the perfect spot for you to rest. It's hidden, and no one will bother you there," he said with a wink. Grateful for his kindness, I followed Tim to the mysterious location. As we reached the spot, I noticed it was right next to the landfill. "Are you sure this is safe?" I asked, my nose scrunching at the stench. "Oh, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry about the smell, you'll get used to it," Tim reassured me. He laid out some newspapers for me to lie on, and as I settled down, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. A strange smell permeated the air, worse than anything I had experienced before. "What's that smell?" I asked, trying not to gag. "It's just the landfill. Don't think about it," Tim replied, seemingly unbothered. But his demeanor changed when he noticed my concern. "This is not normal. Let's find a new spot." Relieved, I followed Tim as he packed up our belongings. However, as he did, I noticed his hand trembling, and his eyes widened in fear. "Tim, are you okay?" I asked, worried. He didn't answer, but suddenly, he fell to the ground, unconscious. I shook him, trying to wake him up, but he wouldn't respond. Panic set in as I had no idea what was happening. I decided to take him back to the guardhouse for help. As we got there, Tim regained consciousness, but he looked terrified. "What happened, Tim? Are you all right?" I inquired, hoping he would explain. I saw something horrifying," he stammered. "A woman. She was dead, and her head was missing. She was clinging to your neck." I couldn't believe what he was saying. It sounded like a nightmare. "Are you sure you didn't just imagine it?" I asked, hoping it was a result of exhaustion. "No, I swear it was real. We have to get help," Tim pleaded, his fear palpable. The next day, still shaken by the events, I decided to seek the advice of a local shaman. I needed to understand what had happened and how to protect myself. The shaman listened carefully to my story, nodding as I recounted the chilling encounter at the landfill. When I finished, he looked grave. "This is an old karma," he said solemnly. "The spirit of a foreign woman who was beheaded years ago still haunts that landfill." I was bewildered. "How is that possible? What does she want from me?" The shaman explained, "She's seeking justice for what was done to her. Her head was never found, and her spirit is restless, seeking revenge." "But why did she appear to me? I had nothing to do with her death," I exclaimed. The shaman looked at me knowingly. "It's not about you specifically, but the energy you carry. You must have unknowingly awakened her spirit while sleeping in that spot. What can I do to protect myself?" I asked, feeling vulnerable and scared. "The only way to break this curse is through good karma. Do good deeds, help others, and show compassion. It will counterbalance the negative energy and protect you," the shaman advised. As I left the shaman's place, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I knew I had to heed his advice, but the fear lingered. Weeks passed, and I dedicated myself to performing good deeds, hoping it would be enough to keep the vengeful spirit at bay. Tim, on the other hand, became reclusive, avoiding any contact with me or others. One day, while I was working, I received shocking news. Tim had been killed in a terrible car accident. The driver claimed that a woman-like figure had suddenly appeared in front of the car, causing the driver to lose control and crash. Tim's body was found decapitated, and the accident occurred near the landfill. I was devastated by the news. It seemed the curse had claimed another victim. But then, something strange happened. I received a letter from Tim, dated a few days before his death. In the letter, Tim explained that he couldn't escape the haunting image of the headless woman. He felt tormented by guilt as if he had a connection to her fate. He decided to revisit the landfill to confront the spirit and ask for forgiveness, hoping it would end the curse. But as he stood near the spot where we had slept, he saw the ghostly figure again, and in his fright, he accidentally stepped on a sharp piece of glass. The glass pierced his neck, causing him to lose consciousness and bleed out. Reading the letter, I realized the truth. Tim's guilt and fear led him to his tragic end. He had been consumed by the curse, and his attempt to find closure only sealed his fate. From that day on, I lived with the knowledge that the spirit of the headless woman was still out there, seeking justice. But I learned an important lesson about the power of karma and the consequences of our actions. I continued to do good deeds, not only to protect myself but also to honor the memory of Tim. The horror of that night at the landfill still haunted me, but it also taught me the value of compassion and the importance of seeking redemption. As I go about my life, I can't help but wonder if the headless woman's spirit will ever find peace. But I take solace in the fact that I have found my sense of peace through the pursuit of good karma. And in the end, that's all we can do in the face of the unknown horrors that may lurk in the shadows of our world. Murderous memories. When I was a teenager, I had a close relationship with my best friend, Emma. She was a tomboy with a generous personality, and we loved spending time together. One day, while sitting and chatting, Emma asked me if I loved her. I responded affirmatively, knowing that my feelings for her were strong. Emma teasingly said, "Even if I were dead, you'd still love me." Without hesitation, I assured her, "Of course, my love for you would never fade, even in death." As time passed, we couldn't hang out as frequently due to our busy schedules. One night, as I was heading home, I noticed someone who looked like Emma standing by her house. I tried to call out to her, but uncertainty made me hesitate. Later, I discovered that she had been at the same place as the previous night, asking for a ride to the hospital to find her mother. I gladly agreed and drove her there. Upon arriving at the hospital, I greeted Emma's mother, whom I had never met before. Everything seemed normal, and I went home after dropping them off. Strangely, the next night, the same scenario repeated. I encountered Emma on the road again, and she asked for a ride to the hospital. This time, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling of déjà vu. Emma's mother appeared to collect her, just like before. The following morning, I learned that my neighbor, Uncle Matt, had an accident in front of Emma's house and was taken to the hospital. When I visited him, he mentioned that Emma was involved in the accident. Surprisingly, when the police investigated Emma's house, they found no one there. Acting on a hunch, they decided to check the nearby garbage dump, and there they discovered Emma's lifeless body. Devastated by the news of her murder, I rushed to the scene of the accident to confirm if it was truly Emma. The sight of the key tattoo on her body confirmed my worst fears. Emma had been shot point blank from behind, her body discarded like trash. The police estimated she had been dead for several days. Confused and grief-stricken, I shared my experiences with my friends, who suggested that I might have a sixth sense that allowed me to communicate with spirits. Determined to find answers, I revisited the places where I had encountered Emma before her death. At one of those locations, I stumbled upon her bracelet and a notebook that seemed to belong to her. As I read the chilling contents of the notebook, I discovered that Emma had been involved in a dark world of drugs, and it detailed the events leading up to her murder. Overwhelmed and terrified, I decided to report everything to the police. Together, we found the notebook and, to my shock, discovered an old disused cemetery nearby. Among the few graves, one bore Emma's mother's name, who had passed away over a decade ago. I couldn't comprehend how I had spoken to her just 2 days before. It felt like a surreal nightmare, and my mind raced with questions. The police eventually caught the person responsible for Emma's death, who confessed that he had killed her to silence her involvement with drugs. He revealed that he had arranged to meet Emma at the dump site that night, where he shot her and buried her body. Shortly after the killer's imprisonment, news spread that he had died, and he claimed that Emma had haunted him every day in prison until his last breath. Even though justice was served, the whole ordeal left me with lingering unease. The inexplicable connection I felt with Emma and her deceased mother haunted my thoughts. I wondered if it was merely coincidence or something far more mysterious. Emma's tragic story would forever be etched in my memory, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The haunting secrets of the 2-story wooden hotel. I arrived in the rural area to meet my girlfriend. It was already 9 p.m., and I decided to take a bus to reach my destination. As I got off at the station, I noticed an old 2-story wooden hotel nearby. Feeling tired and the night being dark, I decided to stay there for the night. The hotel staff greeted me, and I asked for a room. They informed me that there was one room available on the 2nd floor. As I walked towards my room, I glanced back at the staff member and noticed something odd about him. He seemed unusually quiet, but I brushed it off as my tiredness. On the 2nd floor, there were only a few rooms, and most of them were in a decrepit condition. I noticed one particular room that was chained and locked. It felt off, but it turned out to be my assigned room. Reluctantly, I entered, and the atmosphere inside was gloomy, with a musty smell and an eerie chill. I sat on the bed, and as I did, I heard a strange crunching sound. It alarmed me, but when I looked out the window, I saw the same hotel employee locking the main door with a chain. I wondered why they had to lock it, but exhaustion took over, and I decided not to dwell on it. In my dream that night, I witnessed 3 men discussing how to dispose of a dead body. One of them suggested hiding it under the bed, and they placed things on top of it to conceal the body. I woke up in terror, searching for the items, but they were nowhere to be found. My room seemed empty. As I inspected the room, I discovered a wrapped white cloth. To my horror, it contained a corpse with a dark green face, wide open eyes staring right at me. Fear gripped me, and I fled the room, leaving my belongings behind, and ran to the bus station. Arriving at the station at 5 a.m., I realized that my things were still at the hotel. Desperate to retrieve them, I approached a bus driver and asked if he knew anything about the hotel. He informed me that there had been a murder there involving a foreigner. Curiosity mixed with fear, I hired the driver to take me back to the hotel. Upon reaching there, I asked the hotel staff to contact the room and retrieve my belongings. However, they seemed puzzled and said no one stayed in that room the previous night. Confused and scared, I asked them to take me up to the room to find my things. As we entered, to my surprise, my belongings were neatly placed on the bed, just as I left them. The staff couldn't believe it, saying there was no guest in that room yesterday. I was shaken to my core, wondering how this could be possible. Had I dreamt the entire terrifying encounter? The hotel staff assured me that no other employee managed the hotel. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the inexplicable events. As I left the hotel with my belongings, I couldn't help but wonder about the truth behind the haunting and eerie dreams that had plagued me. It seemed as though the hotel held secrets beyond my understanding, and I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that it wasn't just a mere dream. The enigmatic experience left me with lingering questions and the realization that sometimes, reality can be more haunting and mysterious than anything we encounter in our nightmares. The rural area, once a place of simple serenity, now held a chilling secret that would forever be etched in my memory. It had been a long time since I had seen my 4 best friends, Michael, David, Max, and me, James. We decided to have a reunion party since we missed each other so much. The next day, we gathered and Max suggested going to his relative's abandoned house, as it might be a fun and spooky place to prank each other. Late that night, we arrived at the creepy house and started our ghost hunting adventure. Michael suggested playing with an Ouija board, and we all agreed. He went to get the equipment, and while he was away, Max and I didn't feel the fear around us. We were too caught up in our old memories. When Michael returned, with determination in his eyes, Michael dared the mysterious presence. If the mystical things are real, you don't need to move the glass to answer. Come whisper in my ear. They all sat together, waiting for a response, but it seemed like nothing was happening. Undeterred, Michael continued to challenge the unknown. He marched downstairs to the front of the house, heading straight for the shrine. There, he found it, a dancing lady ghost figurine. Michael picked it up and returned to his friends, placing the eerie doll in the center. Jamie asked him why he brought it, to which Michael replied, "When you invite a guest properly, they won't refuse. I brought this doll to find out who came." After that, they continued to play. But nothing happened that day. All 4 people went home because it was very late at that time. 2 days later, David called me in a panic, asking if he could stay at my place because he couldn't bear what was happening. David says, "I'll tell you, let me go to your house first." After arriving, David told Jamie that I haven't slept in the past 2 days. Why? I could hear the music playing in my head. And every time I open my eyes, I will see a dancing woman ghost during the dance, her arms stretched out until they touch the ceiling and her gaze turned to David with a smile on his face. Doing it back and forth, David couldn't stand it, so he ran away and called you. But Jamie thinks what David said is nonsense, but tried to listen and convince David to return to the house. After 4 days, David disappeared from his house without a trace. I went to Michael's house. James narrated David's chilling encounter with the ghost, and how David had mysteriously disappeared afterward. As they discussed the strange events, Michael's girlfriend, Anna, was quietly listening. Concerned, James asked Michael if he found anything, to which Michael replied in the negative. But then he added, "But I wish my wife could be a dancing ghost." As soon as those words left Michael's lips, Anna let out a blood-curdling scream and sat there, trembling and crying. Confused and embarrassed, James tried to ease the tension by saying, "Come on, what's going on? This must be some kind of joke." However, Michael turned around and firmly declared, "No, this is my wife, and I can do whatever I want. She is my wife." The eerie revelation sent shivers down my spine, leaving me in a state of unease and disbelief. As soon as James rises from the table, a horrifying scene unfolds before him. Michael suddenly grabs a gun and shoots Anna without any warning, causing her to collapse to the ground. Shocked and trembling, James stammers, "What are you doing, Michael?" Defiantly, Michael looks at James and replies, "Why can't I do it?" Without a moment's hesitation, he turns the gun on himself and takes his own life. The room falls into silence, filled with an overwhelming sense of dread and disbelief. James is left traumatized by the horrific events that have just unfolded before his eyes, haunted by the chilling question of why his friend committed such a heinous act. In a state of shock, James sat still for a while, trying to comprehend the horrific scene before him. Finally, he mustered the courage to hurry towards the front of the house, desperate to escape its haunting grasp. As they reach the front of the house, an eerie music fills the air, and to James's disbelief, Michael and Anna rise from the ground and start dancing to the haunting rhythm. Unable to make sense of the inexplicable sight, James is filled with terror and flees the house as fast as his legs can carry him. The chilling encounter with the dancing figures leaves him shaken to the core, and he can't erase the haunting image from his mind. Later, I discovered that both Michael and Anna had been dead for 3 days before I even went to see them. It was incomprehensible and eerie. Now only Max and I were left, as David had also vanished. Confused and desperate, I sought advice from my father. He suggested that I go back to the haunted house and apologize for what happened. After that, Jamie traveled to the same house that was Max's relative's house. When James arrived, he made an apology with what I had done that day. After completing the apology, I immediately returned. At the moment that he was walking down from that house, the eyes glimpsed pictures hanging in the house. The unexpected thing that happened was that the photo belonged to Max, which looked old and dusty. It's like it's been a year, and what's even more shocking is that there is a message written under the picture that is the date of Max's death, which is 1 year ago. Right time but wrong number. I work as a taxi driver for a company. Today started like any other day, picking up regular passengers until something unexpected happened. I received a message from the company to pick up a passenger in a house and take them to the airport. I followed the message and drove straight to the address, trying to locate house number 32. As I reached the area, it was dark and eerie, with no lights around. The atmosphere felt strange and unsettling. I found house number 32 and decided to go inside, as the message instructed. Once inside, the house was quiet and dimly lit, with only a faint light coming from the stairs on the second floor. I called the customer but received no response. Feeling uneasy, I decided to wait for a while on the sofa. Suddenly, a woman appeared and asked me why I was in her house. I explained that I was there to pick up a passenger, but she seemed confused and denied requesting a taxi. I checked the message again, and it was the correct address. While we were talking, a man emerged from the kitchen without saying a word and followed the woman upstairs. I wondered why he couldn't help with the luggage if his leg was hurt. Just then, my phone rang with a call from the customer, asking if I had arrived yet. Confused, I told her I was already inside the house, but she said I must be mistaken and should leave immediately. As I turned to leave, I heard the sound of luggage being dragged down the stairs, like tack, tack, tack. Fear gripped me, and I rushed towards the door, trying to open it. But the door wouldn't budge, and the dragging sound grew louder and faster. I kept pushing the door, but it wouldn't open. Finally, I realized I was pushing it the wrong way. With trembling hands, I pushed it in the right direction, and the door slowly opened. I escaped outside, breathing heavily, and saw a woman waving at me from the entrance of the alley. I ran towards her, and she took me to her car. As we talked, I realized that she was the one who sent the message, but she had typed the wrong address. I felt relieved but still shaken by the strange events. Later, I asked a customer about the house. They told me that it had a dark history, involving a couple. The husband had discovered the wife's affair and had taken both their lives, leaving behind a haunted house. The story sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't believe I had unknowingly stepped into such a place. After the incident, I couldn't shake off the fear of ghosts and the supernatural. The memory of the chilling encounter in house number 32 haunted me forever. As a taxi driver, I encountered many different people and places, but nothing could compare to the inexplicable horror of that fateful night. And so, my life as a taxi driver continued, but I carried with me the knowledge that sometimes, the most ordinary places could hold the darkest secrets. The mysterious house at number 32 would forever serve as a reminder of the unknown and the eerie world that existed just beyond our understanding.
Thank you, awesome audience, for tuning in. Your support and enthusiasm mean the world to us. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Until next time, keep spreading positivity and embracing creativity. Stay amazing, and we'll see you soon.